The first time I heard that my insurance claim had been closed, I was standing in my kitchen with one hand on the counter and the other hand holding a telephone that suddenly felt too heavy for an old man's fingers. The woman on the line did not sound cruel. That was the part that made it worse. She sounded trained, patient, and tired in the way people sound when they have said the same sentence to hundreds of strangers. "Mr. Gray," she told me, "the file shows that you withdrew the claim on November 17th. I said, "No, I did not." There was a pause, papers shuffled, or maybe keys clicked. Then she said, "The note says the insured confirmed he did not wish to proceed." The insured, I know it was only a word people use in offices, but it landed badly. Not Arthur, not even Mr. Gray, the man who had paid premiums for 34 years, and certainly not the old mail carrier who knew every porch, step in town, and still remembered which houses had dogs. Behind the screen doors, just the insured. I looked through the kitchen window at the blue tarp over my back room roof, snapping in the wind like a warning flag. Rain had come through that ceiling twice already. The plaster had cracked. The floorboards smelled damp when the heat kicked on. A contractor had stopped returning my calls because I could not approve the work without the insurance payment. And according to a file I had never seen, I had closed the claim myself. That was the first warning. The second came when I asked who had spoken for me. The woman hesitated just long enough for my stomach to tighten. The call notes indicate a family member assisted you. A family member. I had always liked that phrase. It sounded safe to me once, like someone bringing soup or driving you home from the doctor. Standing there with that phone in my hand, I heard it differently. I heard how easily a warm phrase can cover a cold fact. Somebody else had been treated as if they were me. I said, "Was it my voice on that call?" Another pause. "I'm not authorized to characterize the recording, Mr. Gray. You may submit a written request for review." She gave me the sort of office words people use when they are trying not to get involved. Written request, review, closed file. Family member. I hung up before I said something that would make me look exactly like the kind of old man people already thought I was becoming. For a while I just stood there, listening to the tarp slap the roof. My kettle began to whistle, and I did not move to turn it off. It screamed in that little kitchen like something alive. I had delivered other people's letters for nearly 40 years. I had carried envelopes that changed marriages, ended jobs, brought sons home from war, and informed widows about pensions they did not understand. I used to believe a person's name on paper meant something. I used to believe a signature, a claim number, a date, and a clear instruction could hold the world steady. Then my claim was closed in my name, only it was not my voice that had closed it. Before all this happened, I was a quieter man than people remember now. Not meek. There is a difference. I had always believed in not making a scene unless a scene was necessary. My wife, Elaine, used to say I could get a dog to stop barking by looking disappointed at it. She was the one with fire in her. She sent soup back if it was cold. She corrected doctors when they spoke too quickly. She once told a bank manager that gray hair was not a legal reason to speak slowly. I missed that about her after she died. I missed it most in offices. After Elaine passed, the house got louder in the wrong places. The refrigerator hummed like a machine in a hospital room. The hallway clock made every hour feel like it was checking whether I was still there. The back room, the one with the long windows and her sewing table, stayed almost untouched for 8 months. I told people I kept it that way because I was sorting things slowly. The truth was simpler and more shameful. I did not know how to move her scissors. That room was where the trouble began. In early November, a storm came in hard from the west. Not the worst storm I had seen, not even close, but old houses do not need the worst of anything. They only need one weak seam at the wrong hour. A branch came down from the maple behind the garage and caught the edge of the roof above Elaine's room. I heard it at 2 a.m. A hard wooden crack, followed by a scraping drag, as if someone had taken a chair leg across the shingles. I went out in my robe like a fool, holding a flashlight that kept blinking because the batteries were older than some of my shirts. Rain ran down my collar. I could see the broken branch hanging half off the gutter, but I could not see the damage properly until morning. By breakfast, water had found the ceiling. I called the insurance company after coffee, like a sensible man. I had my policy number in the drawer by the phone. I had the date, the time, a rough description, and a repair estimate from the contractor who had patched our porch after Elaine slipped 5 years earlier. I still believed that if you did things in the proper order would protect you. I can still see myself smoothing the paper flat on the table, as if neat paperwork could make the roof behave and the company listen. The first call went well enough. A young man took the claim. He repeated my address, said an adjuster would be assigned, and told me to keep receipts for temporary repairs. I wrote everything down in a spiral notebook Elaine used to keep grocery lists in, not because I was building a case, because I had always written things down. A mailman learns that memory is good, but paper is quieter and more loyal. My niece Carol came by that afternoon with a casserole, a roll of paper towels, and the face people make when they are trying to look cheerful in a house that has started to smell damp. Carol was my sister's daughter. She had been in and out of my life the way relatives often are after funerals, present for a season, then busy, then guilty, then present again. She was 52, divorced, working from home in something involving billing software. I never fully understood it, but she had a way with passwords, forms, and small screens that made me feel like I had been born in a country that no longer existed. She looked up at the ceiling stain in Elaine's room and said, "Uncle Arthur, you shouldn't be handling all this by yourself." I said, "I handled bigger storms with a government mailbag over my shoulder." She smiled, but it was not a smile that let me win. That was different. Those 3 words did more damage than the branch, though I did not know it yet. That was different. When you are young, people say that to mean the world has changed. When you are old, they say it to mean you have changed. They do not always say it unkindly. Sometimes they say it while bringing you dinner. That makes it harder to defend yourself. Carol sat at my kitchen table and opened her laptop. She said insurance companies buried old people in phone menus, and she was not wrong. She said adjusters liked to push claims aside unless somebody stayed on them, and she was probably not wrong about that either. She said she would just help with the calls, and I was tired enough to be grateful. I told her she could sit with me when I called. I did not tell her she could become me. The first week her help felt like help. She wrote down claim numbers in neat block letters. She helped me upload old photos because my hands shook whenever I tried to pinch a screen smaller than a playing card. She corrected the spelling of the contractor's name. When the insurance portal asked for a code sent to my email, she waited while I found it instead of snatching the phone from me. I remember thinking Elaine would have liked that. I remember thinking, maybe I do not have to fight every new thing alone. That is the part I still turn over when I am honest with myself. I did not do one foolish thing all at once. I did a dozen small, convenient things, and each one felt harmless while I was doing it. A phone call here, a password there. A "you talk, I'll listen" that became "let me explain what he means." By the second week, the adjuster still had not visited. The TARP bill had come in. The contractor wanted a deposit. The smell in Elaine's room had gone from damp plaster to something sour behind the wall. Carol told me not to panic. "Insurance always drags its feet," she said. "You'll make yourself sick if you sit by the phone all day." She was not wrong about that either. I remember nodding because she sounded calm and I was tired. There is no grand moment in that. Just an old man, a damp room, and someone else sounding more certain than he felt. Carol offered to take the insurance calls while I went to my physical therapy appointments. My knee had been bad since the winter before, and I had been trying to keep up with exercises because I feared stairs more than I admitted. She said, if the adjuster called and I missed it, the claim would slow down. She said she would put me on speaker if anything important happened. The first time she answered without me, she left a note on the counter. "Insurance called. Just scheduling." I handled it. See, I saw the note when I came home, tired and sore. I should have asked then. I should have said, "Handled how?" I should have called back myself. Instead, I put the note under a refrigerator magnet shaped like a blue jay and made tea. I did not know it then, but that note would bother me for months. A few days later, I called the claims line to ask about the adjuster appointment. The woman told me all communications were now going to the email address on file. I said my email had not received anything. She read the address. It was Carol's. I felt a little embarrassment before I felt anger. That may sound strange, but anyone over 70 will understand. When something changes and you are the last to know, your first fear is not that someone wronged you. Your first fear is that you forgot agreeing to it. I said, "I don't recall changing that." The woman said, "It was updated during a call with your authorized contact." Authorized contact. I said the words back to myself after I hung up. I did not like them. They made the change sound official before I had even understood what had changed. When Carol came by that evening, I asked about the email. She was carrying a pharmacy bag and a packet of ginger cookies because I had once said they sat well on my stomach. "Oh yes," she said lightly. "I had them copy me because you kept missing messages." I didn't miss them. I didn't receive them. That's what I mean. The system is confusing. I want my email on my claim. It still is, Uncle Arthur. I'm just making sure nothing falls through. There it was again. Making sure, helping, protecting, all ordinary words. I had used them myself for other people. That was why they were hard to argue with. I wanted to argue, but she opened the pharmacy bag and set my pills on the counter by day of the week. I saw how tired she looked. The gray at her temples, the little crease between her eyes from squinting at screens. I remembered her as a girl in pigtails at my sister's table, asking Elaine for extra pie crust. I remembered carrying her on my shoulders at the county fair. Age does strange things to family. It makes them children in your mind, even when they are middle-aged and holding the keys to your claim. So I let it go. I let that one sit too. The adjuster finally came on a Thursday. Carol could not be there. I remember because I was relieved. The adjuster was polite but brisk. He measured, took pictures, asked when the tree branch fell, and said the company would review whether there had been prior wear. I told him the roof was old but maintained. He said he could not say much on site. After he left, I wrote in Elaine's notebook. Adjuster came 11:10, 10:30. Took photos, said review. Did not promise. The handwriting was mine, though a little crooked. That notebook would matter later, but not in any dramatic way. It did not contain a secret. It only reminded me what day things happened, when my own confidence began to shake. 2 more weeks passed. I received no decision. Carol said nothing had come through. The contractor called twice. The second time, he sounded annoyed. In that careful professional way people sound when they think an old man is delaying payment. Then, on November 22nd, I got a letter in the mail. It did not come by email. It came the old way, in a white envelope, with the company logo printed in blue. I opened it at the kitchen table with the butter knife Elaine had used for bills, because she disliked tearing envelopes. The letter thanked me for contacting them and confirmed that the claim had been closed at my request. At my request. It said no further action would be taken unless new information was submitted within a stated time. It was the kind of letter that looks harmless until you understand that a door has just been shut and latched from the other side. I read it once. Then again. Then I put on my glasses, though I was already wearing them. I called Carol. She did not answer. I called the claims number. That was when the woman told me the file showed I had withdrawn the claim. A family member assisted you. After I hung up, I sat in the kitchen until the tea in my mug went cold. The blue J magnet held Carol's first note against the refrigerator. Insurance called. Just scheduling. I handled it. By evening, shame had started doing its work. I did not feel brave that evening. I felt small. I kept rereading the letter and then looking away from it, as if the paper were waiting for me to admit something. Maybe I had agreed. Maybe I had sounded tired enough for Carol to think she was doing me a favor. Maybe the woman on the phone had heard something I could no longer remember. I looked through the call log on my telephone. My landline kept incoming numbers if one pressed the right sequence. I had to find the manual in a drawer with old batteries, rubber bands, and Elaine's reading glasses. On November 17th, at 2:14 in the afternoon, there had been a call from the insurance company. I was at physical therapy then. I knew because the appointment card was still in my coat pocket. I had written the time myself. That should have made me feel stronger. It did not, because I also remembered that Carol had driven me home that day. I remembered being tired and stiff. I remembered sitting in the passenger seat while she talked about how I could not keep living with our tarps and contractors and stairs. I remembered saying, I don't know what to do anymore. What if she had taken that as permission? What if I had sounded defeated enough that closing the claim seemed like mercy? That is the kind of thought that gets under your ribs when you are old. Not because you believe it fully, but because you know your memory has failed you before over smaller things. Carol came the next morning. She wore a raincoat and carried no casserole this time. That made me nervous before she opened her mouth. I set the letter on the table. She looked at it, then at me. Oh, Uncle Arthur, what passed across her face was not simple surprise or confusion. It was closer to sorrow, and somehow that made me more afraid. I said, Did you tell them to close it? She took off her coat slowly. I told them you were overwhelmed. That's not closing a claim. I told them you didn't want to keep fighting. I never said that. You said you didn't know what to do. That is not the same thing. She closed her eyes for a moment. I was trying to stop this from swallowing you. I remember the room clearly then. The damp smell from Elaine's sewing room, the sound of rain ticking against the back window, the letter between us. Carol's hands flat on the table as if she were steadying herself on a ship. I didn't authorize you to withdraw anything, I said. Her face changed. Not much, just enough. The pity became impatience. You did authorize me to speak to them, to help me speak, not to decide. Uncle Arthur, you kept forgetting what they asked for. You couldn't upload the photos. You missed emails. You changed the email. Because you weren't handling it. She said it plainly. That hurt more than if she had shouted. You weren't handling it. I wanted Elaine beside me then, not to fight for me, but to witness that I had been spoken to like a child in my own kitchen. Carol softened her voice after that, which was almost worse. She said the roof repair might not be fully covered anyway. She said arguing could drag on for months. She said I should consider selling the house before winter made everything harder. She said she had been looking at senior apartments near her, just in case. She said no decision had to be made today. I noticed that she had brought printed listings in her bag. That was the first moment I stopped hearing help in her voice and heard something else. Maybe it was not a wicked plan. Maybe she had not even named it to herself, but in the shape of it, I was no longer the person being asked. I told her to leave. She stared at me as if I had slapped her. After everything I'm doing, I said, you closed my claim. I protected you from a fight you couldn't win. No, I said, and my voice shook. You protected yourself from watching me fight. She left without the raincoat, fully buttoned. By supper, my sister called. Carol must have phoned her. My sister was 82 and lived 2 states away, with a heart condition and a memory that came and went in patches. I did not want to pull her into it. I should not have answered, she said. Arthur, Carol says you're being hard on her. I looked at Elaine's empty chair. Hard on her. That was the version that had reached my sister first. Not that I was worried, not that I had been hurt, not that something had been done in my name. I was being hard on Carol. I remember gripping the receiver and thinking that Carol had reached people before I even knew there was a story to answer. That was the part that made me feel slow. For the next week, people were kind in ways that bruised. A neighbor saw me at the mailbox and said, Carol's a good girl. She's under pressure too. The contractor told me he could not keep the opening in his schedule without a deposit. A woman from the pharmacy asked if I had someone managing things now, and when I said I managed myself, she smiled too brightly and said, Of course, of course. She meant nothing by it, I suppose. That was almost worse. The words were light, but I carried them home like a weight. At night I heard water in the wall, though sometimes I think I imagined it. I began waking at 3 in the morning and going into Elaine's room with a flashlight. The tarp held some nights and failed others. I placed bowls under the worst spots. I kept receipts for towels, plastic sheeting, and a rented dehumidifier. Every receipt felt both sensible and humiliating, as if I were trying to prove to a faceless office that my house was still real. The claim was closed, but the damage had not stopped. That was the part I could not get anyone to understand. The company could mark a file closed. The water did not care what the file said. I called the insurance company again and asked how to request review. The first representative transferred me twice. The second told me to use the online portal. I said my niece had changed the email. He told me to reset the password. The reset code went to Carol. I sat with the phone in my hand and felt something inside me go cold. It was not panic exactly, and it was not clean enough to be anger. It was colder than that. It felt like standing outside my own front door and seeing a light on inside. I left Carol a message asking her to send me the reset code. She texted back, "We should talk first." I did not answer. The next morning I took a bus downtown to the insurance company's local service office. It was not where claims were decided. They told me that 3 times, but it had a counter and a human being behind glass. That felt important. The human being was Leah Tran. She was young enough that I first resented her for it. That is not fair, but truth ought to include the ugly little corners too. She had a neat sweater, a badge on a lanyard, and the exhausted politeness of someone paid to absorb other people's frustration. When I explained, she did not widen her eyes or promise to fix it. She asked for my ID. Then she asked me to lower my voice, though I had not realized I had raised it. That embarrassed me. My ears got hot. I almost left. But then she said quietly, "Mr. Gray, I can't reopen a claim from here. I can't give you legal advice. And I can't discuss recordings at the counter. But I can print the public claim correspondence we have listed, and I can show you how to submit a written request for a file review and contact correction." I copied the two things she named, correcting the contact information and asking for a file review. The words were not comforting, but they gave my hands something useful to do. I said, "Can you tell whether my email was changed?" She glanced at the screen. Her fingers stopped. "I can't discuss internal details verbally," she said. That sounded like a wall. Then she took a blank sheet of paper and wrote down a mailing address, a fax number, and the words, "Request full claim activity notes, communication history, contact authorization record, and review of withdrawal." She slid the paper to me. "Ask in writing," she said. "Keep a copy. Send it in a way you can prove it arrived." I looked at her. "You believe me?" She did not smile. "I believe you're asking the right question." That was not comfort. Still, it kept me from walking out with nothing. It was a step. Before I left, she printed copies of 3 letters. The original claim acknowledgement, a request for photos sent to Carol's email, and the closure letter. Each page had dates. I put them in order on the bus ride home, balancing the folder on my knee. I paid at the library to make copies of everything I had. The closure letter, my physical therapy appointment card, the contractor's estimate, my receipts, the notebook pages, the landline call log I had photographed with my old digital camera because I did not know how else to preserve it. The librarian did not have to show me how to use the copier, but she did anyway, without calling me dear. I appreciated that more than she knew. Then I mailed the request. It cost $11 and some cents for certified mail. I remember the amount because I stood at the post office counter thinking how strange it was that defending your own name began with a postage receipt. Carol called that evening. "I heard you went to the office," she said. "Who told you?" "The portal sent an alert." "The portal again." I said, "I'm correcting the contact information. You're making this adversarial. You closed the claim. I made a judgment call. In my name." She breathed out hard. "You are not hearing me. You were exhausted. You were confused. You told me you wanted it over." I closed my eyes. There it was. The word had arrived. Confused. She did not shout the word, and it was not written in a medical file. She only placed it gently into a family conversation, the way someone sets down a coaster under a glass. Once that word is in the room, everything an old person says has to climb over it. "I was tired," I said. "Tired is not confused. You forgot the adjuster's name. I wrote down the date. You called me twice asking where the policy folder was, because you had moved it. I organized it." "No, you moved it." There was silence. For a moment I thought she might apologize. She did not. "Uncle Arthur," she said, "if you keep pushing, they may decide you misrepresented the damage. Is that what you want?" A bigger mess. That frightened me because I did not know enough to answer it. At that hour, tired and cold, not knowing was enough to make me want to stop. After she hung up, I almost tore up the copies. I did not. I put them in Elaine's old recipe box instead, not because it was a clever hiding place. Because it was on the counter, and my hands were shaking, and I needed somewhere to put the truth until morning. 2 weeks passed before the company responded. In those 2 weeks, winter settled over the house like a debt collector. The contractor required a deposit I could not comfortably pay. I used part of my emergency savings for temporary sealing around the damaged area. My heating bill rose because the back room would not hold warmth. I stopped buying the better coffee. I cut my blood pressure pills in half for 2 days before I scared myself and took them properly again. I am not proud of that. I am leaving that in because it happened. I stood in my kitchen with the pill bottle open, did a bit of arithmetic in my head, and made a bad decision for 2 days. Then I got scared and corrected it. When the envelope finally came, it was thick enough to make my knees weak. Insides were printed claim notes, redacted in places, and a formal acknowledgement that my contact information had been restored pending review. The claim itself remained closed. The notes were worse than I expected. On November 17th, 2:19 p.m., the file read, "Spoke with insured with family member assisting. Insured does not wish to proceed with claim. States process is causing stress and wants matter closed. Family member confirmed." The phrase "spoke with insured" sat there in the notes as if it were settled fact. I read that line until the words blurred. At 2:19 p.m., I was not in my kitchen. I was in the passenger seat of Carol's car, outside the physical therapy building, trying to get my right leg to bend without swearing. The appointment card proved the appointment time. It did not prove where I was at 2:19. The landline call log proved the insurance company called the house. It did not prove who answered. Carol could say I had been home. Carol could say I had taken the phone. Carol could say anything. I laid those papers side by side and felt both better and worse. Better because the dates did not match Carol's story neatly. Worse because they still left room for her to explain herself. There were other notes too. One said, "Authorized contact reports insured struggling to manage home repairs alone, maybe considering sale of property." Another said, "Family member states insured finds process confusing and does not want further inspections." I had never said that, but I had said I was tired. I had said I did not know what to do. I had asked Carol how people handled all these forms when they lived alone. She had taken the weakest sentences I owned and used them as if they were instructions. That afternoon, my old friend Wes stopped by with a box of screws I had lent him in the spring. Wes and I had worked the same postal routes for years, though he retired before me. He had a habit of leaning in doorways as if every visit were accidental. He looked past me into the hall where the plastic sheeting was stacked. Still not fixed. Claim was closed. He stared at me. Closed. In my name. He shifted the box from one hand to the other. "Carol said you decided not to bother. Said it was too much for you." I wanted to shout at him. What came out was quieter than that. "When did she tell you that?" "At the hardware store. Week or so ago." He looked down. I didn't think it was my place. I did not think it was my place. He said it like a man explaining bad weather. I looked at him and suddenly remembered every time I had said something similar in my own life, just to stay out of trouble. Wes was not a bad man. That is important. He had sat with me after Elaine's funeral until the last guest left. He had changed a tire for Carol once when she was 17. He had brought me tomatoes every August for 20 years. But he had heard a story that made him uneasy, and he had stayed quiet because quiet was easier. "I would have told you if I thought," he began. "If you thought what?" He did not answer. After he left, I wrote in the notebook, "Wes heard Carol say I chose not to bother. Hardware store, around 11:24. He stayed quiet." The sentence looked mean on the page. I almost crossed it out. Then I left it. It was not a kind sentence. It was a true one. I left it there. Leah called 3 days later from the local office. She said she had received a notice that my written request had been logged. She could not discuss details, she reminded me. But she wanted to confirm I had been given instructions on how to preserve additional information. Her voice had that careful quality people use when a call might be reviewed by someone above them. I said, "Is this call being recorded?" "Most calls may be recorded for quality purposes," she said. "Then I will say this clearly. I did not withdraw that claim." A pause. Then, very softly, she said, "I understand that is your position. That is your position." It was not warmth. It was not belief. But it was a phrase the company would have to keep in its own record. She told me that if I had independent evidence of my whereabouts during the disputed call, I should submit it. If there were witnesses, I could include signed statements, though the company might need to verify them. She said I could request that any call recordings be reviewed by someone not involved in the original claim handling. She said it would take time. How much time? I can't promise. How much money? For our review, none. For anything beyond that, I can't advise you. Anything beyond that, lawyers, complaints. More postage, more forms, more chances to look like a stubborn old man chasing a mistake no one else wanted to see. After we hung up, I sat with the appointment card in my hand. It had the physical therapy clinic's name, date, and time. I remembered the receptionist had asked me to sign a screen when I arrived. I remembered because I had made a joke about signing glass, and she had laughed without looking up. The next morning, I called the clinic and asked whether they could confirm my attendance time on November 17th. The receptionist said they could provide records only through the proper request. She sounded busy. I sounded old. That is not an accusation, just a fact. Busy people hear age in a voice and start looking for the quickest door out. I asked for the process. She sighed, then explained. I filled another form, mailed another request, paid for another certified envelope. I kept every receipt. By then, even a post office slip felt like something I might need to defend myself. Carol found out about the clinic request because my sister called me, upset. Carol had told her I was digging through medical records over a misunderstanding. My sister cried. She said she did not want the family torn apart over an insurance claim. I wanted to ask her whether she thought a family stayed whole by letting one person speak over another. I did not ask. She was old, too. Her breath was thin. Her fear was real. Carol had reached her through that fear, so I said, "I love you." "I'm not asking you to choose," she said. "Then why does it feel like choosing?" I wanted to say that she was already being pulled into Carol's version. I did not. My sister was frightened, and frightened people grab the nearest simple answer. By then, the dispute had become more than a roof. That is what Carol kept failing to understand, or perhaps what she understood too well. If this had been only about shingles and plaster, I might have quit. I might have patched what I could, taken the loss, and told myself peace was worth more than payment. But my name was in a file saying I had given up. My voice had been replaced, and the replacement had been accepted because it was easier for everyone. I began to feel it in ordinary rooms too, at the pharmacy, on the porch, even in my own kitchen when I reached for the phone. The first real crack in Carol's version did not come from a dramatic recording. It came from the physical therapy clinic, in a beige envelope with my name misspelled. The attendance record showed I checked in at 1:52 p.m. and checked out at 2:34 p.m. on November 17th. The disputed call was logged at 2:19. It did not prove I had not spoken by mobile phone. It did not prove Carol had. But it proved I had not been at home by the landline where the company had called. I sent the clinic record, the landline call log, and a written statement explaining the timing. The company acknowledged receipt. Then nothing. For 12 days, nothing. During those 12 days, Carol came by twice, and I did not open the door. The first time, she left a bag of groceries. The second time, she left a note that said, "I am trying not to let you make a mistake you'll regret." I kept the note. It did not prove anything legal. I knew that. But it showed the tone of what had been happening, and it showed how she had started to see me. On the 13th day, a man named Martin Calder called. He was from the company's internal review unit. His voice was low and flat, the kind of voice that has learned not to carry emotion into recorded lines. He said my review request had been escalated. He said the claim remained closed during review. He said they would examine the communication history. I said, "Will you listen to the call?" He said, "We will review available materials." Was there a recording? I can't confirm that at this stage. You can't confirm whether you recorded the call that closed my claim? I understand your concern. I had heard that phrase too many times by then. I pressed my thumb against the edge of the table and waited for the useful part of the sentence to come. He asked whether Carol had permission to speak on my behalf. I said she had permission to assist with calls, not to decide or withdraw anything. Was that permission documented? I swallowed. There it was, the weak place. I had signed a form at the beginning allowing her to receive communications about the claim. Carol had printed it. I had read it too quickly. I remember the words, "assist with claim communications." I did not remember all the fine print. I remembered thinking if I asked too many questions, I would look foolish. That was my mistake, and I had to admit it. It did not give her the right to become me, but it was real enough that my anger had to make room for it. "I signed something," I said, but I did not sign away my voice. Martin did not respond to that as a human being. Perhaps he could not. "Please send any copy you have." Carol had the copy, of course. I searched my folders until my back ached. Policy documents, old tax papers, Elaine's death certificate, repair receipts, appliance warranties for things no longer in the house. No authorization form. I called Carol. She answered on the first ring, which told me she had been waiting. "I need the form I signed," I said. "Which form?" "The insurance authorization." "I sent it to them already." "I need my copy. I don't know if I have it." "You printed it." "Arthur, listen to yourself. You're accusing me like I'm some criminal. I'm asking for a paper with my signature. You're humiliating both of us." That sentence stopped me. I had to put the receiver down on the table for a moment. Somehow in her mouth, my asking for a copy had become another injury done to her. I said, "Send me the form." She did not. But 3 days later, Martin Calder sent a copy as part of the review packet. The form did say Carol could receive claim communications and assist in providing information. It did not say she could withdraw the claim. The signature at the bottom was mine, shaky but mine. Seeing it made me feel foolish and steadier at the same time. I had been careless. I had not been absent. That distinction mattered. The review moved slowly. The roof did not. A section of plaster fell one morning with a sound like a dropped tray. I stood in the doorway of Elaine's room and looked at the broken white pieces on the floor around her sewing chair. I laughed then. Once, not because anything was funny. Because grief sometimes comes out wearing the wrong coat. I paid the contractor a smaller sum to remove damaged plaster and prevent further water intrusion. He gave me a discounted rate after looking at my face, though he pretended it was because winter work was slow. I appreciated the lie. Wes came by while the contractor's men were there. He stood on the front walk, hands in his jacket pockets. "I should have told you what Carol said," he muttered. "Yes," I said. "I didn't want trouble. I know that doesn't make it better. No." He looked at the blue tarp. "Want me to write down what I heard?" I did not answer right away. Part of me wanted to punish him by saying it was too late. Part of me knew too late was still better than never. "Write only what you remember," I said, "not what you think I want." He nodded. His statement was not dramatic. It did not accuse Carol of fraud or malice. It simply said that on or about November 24th, Carol told him at the hardware store that I had decided not to continue with the claim because it was too stressful and that she was helping me move towards selling the house. He added that I had never told him that myself. It was a small statement. It came late. I still needed it. I mailed it anyway. Then came the recording. It did not come straight to me in the mail. Martin called first and said the review unit had located audio from the disputed call. Due to company policy, he said, they would not release the recording at that stage, but a reviewer had listened. He asked if I was available to answer questions. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles hurt. "Was I on it?" I asked. He did not answer directly. "The audio quality is imperfect. There is a female voice that identifies herself as assisting you. There is a male voice in the background, but it is not clear whether the male voice confirms the withdrawal." A male voice in the background. I sat down. That day at 2:19, I had been in Carol's car after physical therapy. Could she have called from her mobile phone while I sat beside her? Could I have muttered something without understanding what she was saying? I searched my memory and found only fragments. Rain on the windshield, my knee hurting, Carol saying, "Let me handle it," the heater blowing too hot on my feet. "What does the male voice say?" I asked. Martin paused. The reviewer noted a phrase that may be "I don't know" or "I just don't know." I closed my eyes. I did remember saying that in the car. Not about closing the claim, about whether the house would ever feel like mine without Elaine. There it was. My own tired voice, maybe only a few words of it, being used in a place where I had not meant it to go. "That was not consent," I said. Martin said, "That is part of what we are reviewing. Part of what we are reviewing." The phrase was cold, but beneath it I heard something shift. Not belief, perhaps. Unease. Carol called that night. I think Martin or someone had contacted her. Her voice was sharp before I said hello. "Do you understand what you're doing to me?" I sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open. "I understand what you did to me. I was in the car with you. You said you couldn't take any more. I said I didn't know what to do. You said you wanted it over. No. You wanted it over. For your sake, for your convenience." She made a sound, half laugh, half sob. "You think I enjoyed this? You think I wanted to spend hours dealing with your roof and your paperwork and your moods? I have a job. I have bills. I have my own life." There it was, finally. Not the whole truth, but a truer piece of it. I said nothing. She went on. "You were falling apart in that house. Everybody could see it." "Everybody? Don't twist my words. You spoke to them. I asked for advice. You built a case. I tried to get people to understand. Understand. What? That you needed help. By then I was tired of the word help. It had been made to carry too much. I asked, If I needed help, why didn't you ask me what kind? She had no answer for that. A week later, Martin scheduled a formal review call. He said I could have someone with me if I wished. I almost asked Wes, then decided against it. I did not want another man in the room to make my voice sound more credible. Maybe that was pride. Maybe it was dignity. I am still not sure. Leah could not join, but she called the day before to say she had confirmed my written materials were in the review file. She said it like a clerk confirming boxes. Still, I heard something kind underneath. "Mr. Gray," she added, "make a list of the points you need to say. Calls like that can move fast." I wrote the list in Elaine's notebook. 1. I authorized assistance, not withdrawal. 2. Call was during physical therapy. 3. My statement "I don't know" was not consent. 4. Contact email changed without my clear understanding. 5. Claim should be reviewed on damage, not on Carol's version of my stress. 6. I want all future decisions confirmed in writing to me. I kept it without speeches or pleading. The review call lasted 42 minutes. Martin was there. Another company reviewer was there, but did not say much. Carol was not on the line at first. They asked me to describe the events. I read from my list, slowly. My voice shook once when I mentioned Elaine's room. I stopped, took water, and continued. I did not apologize for stopping. Then they asked about Carol's role. I said she helped because I was grieving and not good with the online portal. That is true. She used that help to make herself sound like the person in charge. That is also true. There was no music, no courtroom silence. Just a phone line and the faint hum of my refrigerator. Martin asked whether I disputed ever expressing stress about the claim. No, I said. I was stressed. I am still stressed. Stress is not withdrawal. I had not written that sentence down. I surprised myself by saying it clearly. Carol joined the call near the end. Her voice was smaller than I expected. She said she had understood my comments in the car to mean I wanted her to stop the process. She said she had acted in good faith. She said she may have overstated things to keep the claim from dragging on. She said she was worried about me. She used the word overstated. I wrote it down. It looked smaller on paper than it felt in my chest. Martin asked whether I had directly instructed her to withdraw the claim. Carol was silent. Only for maybe 3 seconds, but it was long enough for me to hear the refrigerator hum and my own breathing. Then she said, "Not in those exact words." I wrote those words down while she was still breathing on the line, because they were the first words from her that did not sound polished. It was not a confession or an apology. It would not make the plaster reattach itself to the ceiling. But it was the first time the file heard her uncertainty instead of only mine. After the call, nothing happened for 10 days. Those 10 days were ordinary, in the meanest way. I counted pills before the refill. I checked the tarp after every rain. I rehearsed what I might say if the letter went against me. Some afternoons I sat with the phone beside me and disliked myself for hoping it would not ring. During those 10 days, I avoided the hardware store. I told myself it was because I did not need anything. The truth was, I could not bear another half-sympathetic look. I went to a different pharmacy, 10 minutes farther, where nobody knew Carol. I took the long way home to avoid passing my sister's old church, where people still remembered me as Elaine's husband, and not yet as the old man, making trouble about an insurance claim. Then the letter came. It was not dramatic. There was no apology in large print, no admission that anyone had meant harm, no sentence that would satisfy a person watching for justice like a thunderclap. The company wrote that after review, the withdrawal of the claim had been insufficiently supported by clear authorization from the insured. They restored the claim for evaluation. They corrected the contact record so that I would receive direct communication. They noted that future claim disposition would require my direct confirmation in writing or on a verified call. They said the damage assessment would proceed subject to policy terms and documentation. The language was dry and careful, and it protected the company first. I read it 3 times. Then I put my hand flat on the table and cried. I did not cry because I had won. I had not fully. The claim was only restored. The damage still had to be evaluated. Some repairs would not be covered. There would be depreciation, exclusions, back and forth, estimates, delays. The money, when it finally came, would not cover everything the water had ruined. The emergency savings I spent would not all come back. Elaine's sewing chair had a stain on one leg that no letter could remove. I cried, because a piece of paper had finally said what everyone else had made me feel foolish for saying. I had not agreed to disappear. The weeks after that were not clean. Carol did not become a villain dragged into the town square. She did not lose everything. She did not make a full confession at a family table. Real life rarely gives you the satisfaction of a person explaining exactly how they chose wrong. She sent one email. I am sorry if I made decisions too quickly. I was scared for you. I still think you need more help than you admit. I hope someday you understand that. I stayed with that first word for longer than I should have. If. She had left herself a small door to walk through. I wrote back 3 days later. I understand you were scared. I do not accept fear as permission. Do not contact any company, office, doctor, contractor, or account in my name again unless I ask you in writing. It took me an hour to write that. My hands trembled after I sent it, not because the words were harsh, because they were boundaries, and I had not used boundaries with family often enough to be graceful at them. My sister called after reading whatever version Carol gave her. She cried again. I did not defend myself this time beyond the truth. I love Carol, I told her. I am not giving her my voice. My sister was quiet for a long while. Then she said, I suppose those can be different things. That was as close as we came to peace. The insurance assessment moved forward. A different adjuster came. This one spoke directly to me, perhaps because the file now had warnings in it. He inspected the roof, the back room, the walls. He asked questions and waited for me to answer. When he needed clarification, he did not look over my shoulder for a younger person. I noticed that. Once you have been spoken over, direct attention feels almost intimate. The final payment covered a portion of the repairs. Not all. I disputed one item and lost. I accepted another because I was too tired to fight over every board and nail. I do not dress that up as wisdom. I was tired. My knee hurt. The house was cold. I chose which fight I still had strength for. I repaired the roof. I replaced the damaged plaster. I kept Elaine's sewing chair stain and all. The contractor said he could sand it down. I said no. I do not know why. Maybe I needed one object in the room to admit what had happened. Wes still brings tomatoes in August. For a while he left them on the porch and knocked only once. Eventually I invited him in for coffee. We talk about baseball, weather, and knee pain. We do not talk much about Carol. But one afternoon he said, I should have stood up sooner. I said yes. He looked at me, surprised by the plainness of it. Then he nodded. After that, it was easier to drink coffee with him. Not easy, easier. Leah left the local office the following spring. I know because I went in to drop off a thank you card, and the woman at the counter said she had transferred to compliance training. I hoped that was good. I hoped she had not been punished for sliding me that sheet of paper. The card only said, "You did not save me. You showed me the next correct step." That was enough. I never sent Carol a Christmas card that year. She sent one with a printed message and no handwriting except her name. I put it in the drawer with the other cards and felt neither noble nor cruel, just older. People sometimes ask, usually in that nosy, gentle way, whether Carol and I reconciled. They want a soft ending. They want me to say blood is blood and forgiveness is a warm quilt. Here is what I can say. I do not hate her. Hate takes energy I need for stairs. I believe she was frightened. I believe she saw my grief, my messy table, my bad knee, my confusion with passwords, and decided that because I needed some help, she should be the safer pair of hands. I can understand the fear. I cannot accept what she did with it. She did not steal my house. She did not empty my bank account. She did something easier to excuse and harder to name. She treated my exhaustion as consent. Some people who hear this will say Carol meant well. I have said it myself on kinder days. Maybe she did. But when I look at that repaired ceiling, I know this much. Worry did not give her my voice, and love did not turn her answer into mine. After the repairs, I changed a few things. Nothing grand. I did not start a foundation or give speeches. I did not become a hero for seniors with insurance trouble. I still dislike forms. I still forget where I put my glasses. Twice last month I walked into the pantry and could not remember why. I am not less old because I was right. But I keep a folder now by the phone. On the front it says, "No one speaks for me without written permission." Inside are policy numbers, doctor contacts, passwords sealed in an envelope, and a page listing who may receive information and who may make decisions. Those are not the same list. Once a neighbor came over with a Medicare letter she did not understand. I told her I could not advise her. Then I sat with her while she read the phone number, the deadline, and the name on the top of the page. I asked her one question. Do you want someone to help you understand it, or do you want someone to answer for you? She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, I didn't know those were different. I said they are. That was all. There is one more thing I keep in that recipe box, folded behind the letter. It is the small note Carol left after I refused to answer the door. I am trying not to let you make a mistake you'll regret. I used to read that note and get angry all over again. Now I read it more slowly. What bothers me is not only that she thought I was making a mistake. Families worry. People misjudge one another. What bothers me is the feeling underneath it, the feeling that she had quietly made herself the person allowed to stop me from choosing. She called that care. Maybe, on some frightened day, she even believed it was. I do not show that note to many people. I am telling you about it, because someone's listening may have a similar sentence sitting in a drawer, or on a phone, or somewhere in the chest, where old hurts stay warm. Maybe it came from family, maybe from a doctor's office, a bank counter, a neighbor who took over one errand too many. If this has happened to you, you may know the question I still turn over. When does help stop being help? And when does it become someone else living out your decision before you have made it? Elaine's room is dry now. The new plaster is smooth, a little too smooth compared with the old walls. In afternoon light, you can see where the repair begins if you know where to look. Most visitors do not notice. I do. The sewing chair sits by the window. I sometimes put my hand on the stain at the bottom of one leg. It is small, darker than the wood around it. A mark from a season when water came through the roof and someone tried to close the damage before I was done speaking. I keep the insurance letter in the recipe box. I do not keep it because I want to relive the whole business. I keep it because some papers deserve to stay where you can find them. On quiet mornings, when the kettle starts its low rumble, I still hear that woman's voice from the first call. The insured confirmed he did not wish to proceed, and I answer her now, not loudly, not angrily, just clearly enough for the room to know the truth. No, the insured did not.